Ford built power. America built muscle. And for years, that was enough. Big engines, loud exhaust, and cars that looked like they owned every road they touched. Because for decades, America believed one thing. No foreign car could ever threaten American performance. Not seriously. Not on American roads. And definitely not in front of American drivers. Then one small Japanese car arrived and quietly changed that forever. At first, nobody was afraid of it, because it didn't look dangerous, it didn't sound aggressive, and it didn't come from a company known for building legends. It came from a country many Americans still saw as a maker of small economy cars. Cheap cars, slow cars, forgettable cars. And that's exactly why nobody saw it coming. Because sometimes the biggest threat is the one nobody respects. That car was the Datsun 240Z. And when it arrived in America, it didn't just surprise people, it shocked them. Because this wasn't just another imported sports car. This was something completely different, something America wasn't ready for. To understand why, you have to understand what the car world looked like before it arrived. In the late 1960s, American performance meant one thing: more power. If a car had a bigger engine, it was better. If it made more noise, it was respected. If it burned more fuel, people loved it even more. That was the culture. The Ford Mustang, the Chevrolet Camaro, the Dodge Challenger. These cars weren't just transportation, they were identity. Owning one meant something. It meant confidence, it meant status, it meant power. And most importantly, it meant speed. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. Because while America focused on building heavier and louder cars, Japanese engineers were thinking differently. Instead of asking, how do we build more power, they asked something smarter. How do we build a better car? That single question changed everything. Because instead of chasing brute force, they focused on balance, weight distribution, reliability, handling, efficiency, things many American manufacturers still ignored. And eventually, all of that thinking became one machine, the Datsun 240Z. When people first saw it, they underestimated it immediately. It looked too small, too simple, too refined. Compared to American muscle, it almost looked harmless. Some drivers laughed, some dismissed it instantly, and some believed the same thing. There's no way that thing can keep up. And in a straight line, sometimes they were right. But the road doesn't stay straight forever. And that's where everything changed. Because the moment the road started turning, the 240Z became a completely different animal. It was lighter, hundreds of pounds lighter than many American rivals. That meant faster response, sharper movement, and better control. But the real difference was the way it felt. Drivers who got behind the wheel noticed it immediately. The steering felt alive, the chassis felt connected, and every movement felt intentional. It didn't feel like a machine fighting the road. It felt like a machine working with it. That was something many American performance cars simply couldn't match. And then the races began. At first, nobody paid attention. A few local races, a few private challenges, a few quiet comparisons. But slowly, stories started spreading. Mustangs were losing, Camaros were struggling, and drivers who expected easy wins were suddenly asking uncomfortable questions. How is this happening? Because the numbers didn't seem dangerous. The engine wasn't huge, the horsepower wasn't outrageous, and the car didn't look intimidating. But once it moved, everything changed. Because the 240Z wasn't trying to overpower American muscle. It was outsmarting it. Through corners, it stayed planted. Under braking, it stayed stable. And at higher speeds, it stayed composed. Meanwhile, some heavier American cars felt nervous, loose, unpredictable, and for the first time, some American drivers experienced something they weren't used to: being left behind. Not by a Ferrari, not by a Corvette, but by a Japanese car they almost ignored. That's when the shock turned into something else, because once drivers understood what the 240Z could do, they couldn't laugh anymore. They had to take it seriously. And that became the real turning point. Because once a car earns respect, everything changes. Suddenly, American enthusiasts started paying attention. Magazines started writing about it. Dealers started noticing demand, and buyers who never considered a Japanese sports car before started changing their minds. Because this wasn't just a cheaper alternative. It was better in ways people didn't expect. And even more importantly, it was accessible. That was the dangerous part. Because high performance used to feel exclusive. You paid more for it. You sacrificed reliability for it. You accepted compromises for it. But the 240Z changed that. It offered style, performance, balance, and reliability at a price normal people could actually afford. That made it more than a car. It made it a threat. Because suddenly, you didn't need a giant American V8 to feel fast. You just needed the right engineering. And that idea made some manufacturers nervous. Because once drivers discover there's another way, they rarely go backward. And the 240Z did more than win races. It changed expectations. People stopped asking, how much power does it have? And started asking, how well does it drive? That shift sounds small, but for the industry, it was massive. Because it forced American car makers to look at performance differently. They could no longer rely only on tradition. They could no longer rely only on sound. And they could no longer assume loyalty would last forever. Because now, drivers had seen something new. A car that didn't need to shout to prove itself. And maybe that's why the 240Z became so important. Because it didn't just challenge America, it changed how America looked at performance. And years later, that impact still remains. Because modern sports cars now focus on the same things the 240Z understood early: balance, control, precision, not just power. And when you look back at that moment now, it becomes clear. The Datsun 240Z wasn't just another Japanese sports car. It was the car that forced America to pay attention. Could beat ego. And the car that quietly shocked an entire country. So now the question is simple. If you had been there, would you have believed it? Or would you have laughed too, right before it passed you?